Sigu Swabiku. Thank you everybody for joining us today for our quarterly NICRN meeting. We're really happy to have you all here and our speaker Molly, who will be talking about NIDIS and their tribal engagement strategy in the Pacific. This is our first time in webinar style, so please use the chat box if you have any comments. And then we also have a Q&A box as well. So if you have any questions for us or for the speaker, please put them in there. That way we can answer them. And for right now, since we're a pretty small group, we can have everybody who's an attendee, if you just want to type into the chat box where you're coming from as a big shout out, that would be great. And I'll turn it over to Casey for an announcement.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Winikasuk, everyone. It's Casey Thornbrew, Tribal Climate Science Liaison with United South and Eastern Tribes, and working with the Northeast and the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Centers. Good to see some familiar names on there, and good to see members of the network. Just a quick announcement before we begin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I wanted to share this announcement here from the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. The Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center is right now offering 2 fellowship opportunities through the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, ORISE. But it's to work closely with the USGS Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. One of these is a fellowship position as a USGS Tribal Climate Strategies Research Scholar. And this is a position that would work closely with myself as the Tribal Climate Science Liaison to connect with tribal nations in the Southeast CASC region. The focus is to develop an understanding of how tribal nations in the Southeastern US consider climate change as part of long-term planning, to develop understanding of technical needs of tribal nations to incorporate climate science into natural and cultural resource management, and to develop understanding of scientific questions needed to better address tribal climate-related resource management challenges. So a couple things. The application deadline, you may have seen this announcement before. The deadline was August 31st, but has been pushed back to September 15th. If you are interested or know people who may be interested in applying, I would encourage applying as soon as you're able to. This is like a postdoc, similar to one. They are seeking a background in PhD in environmental science, but also Native American studies. Basically, individuals that have experience with climate change related work, but also have worked with or are very knowledgeable of working with tribal agencies and tribal governments. And so it is a 1-year position, but can be continued for 2 additional years should funding be available. And what makes it a little different than many other postdocs is if there are individuals that maybe have been outside of academia for some time, maybe working for a tribal nation or tribal organization, or have been out in the field, so to speak, for many years, those individuals are also encouraged to apply. I know for many conventional postdocs, those positions, they usually seek people who haven't been out of academia for a long period of time. So those that have been further along in their career are also welcome to apply if they're in the kind of position and interest to do so. So I put in the chat the link to this opportunity, so please feel free to take a look and share with others. I also do want to mention a second opportunity as well, a postdoc fellowship on climate impacts. This focuses more on the climate modeling aspect. So looking for individuals that have experience in statistics, climate modeling, and interpreting results to basically work to integrate projections into climate change planning in the Southeast, also at a level working with federal, tribal, and state agencies. So both of these are listed. Both of the deadlines have been extended till September 15th. So if you go to this site here to get more details and apply, you can just click right there and it'll take you to the ORISE application site. So just wanted to share that, and I'll put in also my email contact if you have further questions. Top time to thank you.
Thanks, Casey. So we will get into the presentation for today. So our speaker today is Molly Woloszyn. Thank you. She's the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NIDIS, which is the National Integrated Drought Information System, which is part of NOAA. So she's here today to talk about NIDIS and their tribal engagement strategy. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Molly.
All right, sorry, just trying to click all the buttons. You can see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me just open up the chat and Q&A here, get everything situated. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today to present to everyone about the tribal engagement strategy with NIDIS. I am going to talk a little bit about NIDIS in general, and then get into the tribal engagement strategy, and then finally talk a little bit about drought.gov and some of the resources that we have available on our website. Okay, so first, just a quick overview. What is NIDIS? Again, that's the National Integrated Drought Information System. So NIDIS was first authorized by Congress in 2006 and reauthorized 2 times since then, in 2014 and 2018. NIDIS has an interagency mandate to develop and provide a national drought early warning information system. I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what is an early warning system here in just a second. But essentially, we are tasked to help our country move from a reactive state to a more proactive one when it comes to managing drought. And the work that NIDIS does, as Sara mentioned, we are a part of NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, but we work with partners across all levels of government, federal, state, tribal, and local partners, as well as academia, the private sector, and other organizations. So as I mentioned, we are tasked to develop a national drought early warning system. Well, for me, it's easiest to start by looking at the definition of early warning in order to understand what a drought early warning system is. And the definition of early warning is the provision of timely and effective information that allows individuals exposed to a hazard to take action to avoid or reduce their risk. And so if we put this in the context of drought, what are those pieces of information that people need in order to make more informed decisions to reduce their risk? And those pieces of information are shown here on this graphic, and that includes observations and monitoring, predictions and forecasting, planning and preparedness, communication and outreach, and also research and applications. So even though the title of early warning might seem like it's just the earlier warning, the forecasting, while that's a really important piece of it, it's really all of these factors combined that reduces someone's risk to drought. So in order to fulfill our mandate to develop a national drought early warning system, recognizing that the climate and drought are different across the country, we have started by launching regional drought early warning systems across the country. And these go back to the late 2000s, so several have been around for about a decade now. And we have 8 regions across the country. I coordinate the Midwest Dues region, which is in the brown on the screen. And I will show the contact information later on. We do have a Northeast Dues, and I should say we use the acronym Dues for Drought Early Warning System. But we do have another coordinator, Sylvia Reeves, for the Northeast region, and I will provide her contact information here at the end. And I also, there's one other NIDIS person on the call, and that is Crystal Stiles, and she's our new tribal coordinator, and I will have her introduce herself here in just a little bit. There she, or Crystal, do you want to do it right now? Let's just do it right now.
Sorry about that. Sure.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Stiles, and I'm the new Tribal Engagement Coordinator with NIDIS. And my role is primarily to work with tribal nations across the country to help achieve drought early warning and help tribes be more resilient to drought and other extreme events. And just a little background on me. Previously, I was an applied climatologist with the High Plains Regional Climate Center, which is housed at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And also worked with the National Drought Mitigation Center. I did a lot of things at that job, but the big thing was that I led the tribal engagement program. We had several projects that at our center that we collaborated with tribes and other partners to deliver workshops on how to interpret climate data and information, and to help locate tools and products that can be used for planning or for monitoring and so forth. And so anyway, I'm really happy to be with NIDIS and doing this type of work full time. And I'll put my email address in the chat in case you'd like to get in touch with me. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. And I don't know, you might have mentioned this and I missed it, but Crystal just started at the beginning of August. So I'm presenting today as she kind of still gets things under her belt, but she definitely will be a great person to engage with here moving forward. So just really quickly with the dues, really what's unique about our regions is that it's really a network of people, people that work or are affected by drought, again, across all levels of government, academic partners, and others. And the goal of these drought early warning systems is to really make climate and drought science more accessible and useful for decision makers, and to really understand and share with one another about the impacts of drought, the best ways to monitor drought, to forecast, all of those pieces combined. That's really the idea of the drought early warning system. And just to describe that a little bit more, I wanted to show a few examples of the Midwest Dues in action and sort of what we are up to right now. So if we look at the different types of information, for instance, observations and monitoring, there's a lot of work going on. A couple are highlighted here. The first is that the Indiana State Climate Office and the Midwestern Regional Climate Center are developing a flash drought risk tool for the region. And there's also a study that's trying to identify how well different indicators work for monitoring drought in the Midwest. Another thing that we're actively doing is sending out communication and doing other outreach related to the current drought conditions. So we send out drought status updates for the region. NIDIS does this with our regional partners, and this screenshot here shows one from December. We'll actually be sending one out here again soon, because right now Minnesota and other areas of the north central US are being pretty affected by drought. So we'll be sending one out here tomorrow. But it's really a quick snapshot of the conditions, and we send these out by email and also available on drought.gov. Another way that we interact with one another is through our in-person meetings. And typically these are held annually. We've had them roughly every year since the Midwest Dues launched in early 2016. And this is a really good opportunity to get a lot of partners together in the region to share information with one another, whether that's learning more about different drought resources that are available, hearing about different drought projects that are going on, sharing best practices, or really diving into different topics that are affecting the region. And one of the other reasons that these meetings have been really beneficial, as people that have attended have said, is a great place to network and connect, and to make those connections with people so that when you are in the next drought, or feel like the drought might be coming on here shortly, you have different people that you can reach out to and learn from. Another couple of examples of the Midwest Dews in action. There's a lot of great research projects going on right now related to drought. We are looking at sort of the historical characteristics of drought in the Midwest region. And we're also looking at a research study that's looking at both ends of the spectrum. So from too much water to too little, and how we seem to be transitioning between those two pretty quickly. And also we have some projects around planning and preparedness. One example is in Ohio, where they are doing an assessment of drought impacts and the best indicators for the state of Ohio. And I know that this is a Northeast call. So as I mentioned, we do have a Northeast Dews. So this is giving you a look at the Midwest region, but there is more information on drought.gov, and I'll show you at the end here with more information for the Northeast part of the United States. So moving forward for the next couple of years, the Midwest Dews will be releasing its new strategic action plan here within the next couple of months. And just quickly, I wanted to showcase some of the priorities that we will have moving forward. We will have some activities focused on identifying the best drought indicators for the Midwest Dews by sector, season, and location. And a big part of this is identifying the best indicators for forested areas. So a lot of the upper Midwest going into the Northeast, of course, has forested areas, and that's one area that we don't have a lot of information for. So that is one focus of the drought indicator work moving forward. Again, we're going to continue the research, better understanding drought characteristics and predictability in the Midwest, and also that flip-flop between too wet and too dry. Another priority is to identify innovative solutions and proactive measures for drought mitigation and response, and sharing those across the Midwest Dews network. We also want to enhance collaboration and coordination and communication among the network. Again, trying to establish those opportunities for connecting with others across the region that might have a similar job as yours that you can learn from and talk to and make those connections. And finally, the last priority is a pretty big one, where we hope to integrate, or we plan to integrate, the Great Lakes watershed into the Midwest Dews. So if you noticed when I showed the map earlier, there are some areas that do not have a drought early warning system, and the Great Lakes is one of those. And so we want to start to do some outreach and start to plan for covering the Great Lakes watershed with a drought early warning system. Okay, so now I was just going to jump into talking a little bit more specifically about our work and our strategy for tribal engagement. Before I talk about the strategy, though, I did want to just briefly look at where is drought right now in the Northeast into the Midwest, and how is it affecting tribal nations. I just wanted to make sure you guys can still see my screen, the presentation, correct? It did something weird. I just want to make sure.
Yep, we can still see it. Okay,
great. Thank you. So this is something I pulled from one of our interactive maps on drought.gov, and I'll showcase this here in a little bit. The blue outlines are showing the boundaries for reservations of federally recognized tribes, overlaid with the U.S. Drought Monitor. And it shows the severity of drought going from yellow, which is just abnormally dry, and then you get into the drought levels starting with moderate drought up to D4, exceptional drought, which is the darkest color on the map. And you can see that right now we do actually have D4 affecting some tribes in Minnesota. And those are the tribes of the Chippewa Nations in the Red Lake Band, and also I believe it is the White Earth Band. So those tribes are being affected by pretty severe, the highest level of drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor right now. And there is some drought scattered elsewhere in the Northeast. There were more severe drought conditions a few months ago. Things have improved, but there is still moderate and severe drought in the Northeast. So in terms of drought impacts, there are definitely some unique drought impacts on tribal nations related to what typically is seen, of course, with reduced water, whether that's for growing agriculture, farming, for providing water for wildlife, livestock. Those are all impacts that are felt on tribal nations as well. But I wanted to point out some of the unique impacts. During drought, the lack of water can impact things that are very sacred, ceremonies and other rituals that are done that you need water for, and you need that wildlife or plants. And so that is a big impact, as well as human health impacts. And so excessive heat, decreased water quality, mental and physical stress, these are all things that we see during drought. And so, while NIDIS has been doing our work across the country for many years now, we have had interactions and engagement with tribal nations, but we wanted to be a little bit more proactive in reaching out to tribal nations and really making sure that the voices of tribal nations are represented across our dues. And that's really what led us to the development of our tribal drought engagement strategy, which was released, I believe it was late last year. And so this lays out the priorities for our tribal engagement from 2021 to 2025. And this strategy was developed through engagement with tribal nations in the Missouri River Basin and also the Midwest dues. But a lot of the actions, the activities that are identified within this strategy are actually things that we want to do across the entire country. So even though it does say the Missouri River Basin and Midwest dues, there are a lot of activities that are that represent areas outside of those regions. And so, as Crystal said, we hired her to really help us move our tribal engagement forward, using this strategy really as sort of the launching point for a lot of work that she's doing. And I will give an update here in just a little bit on some current highlights that we've had for tribal engagement. But again, the point of this was really to make sure that we're integrating tribal perspectives into our NIDIS work, to make sure that we are ensuring that tribal nations are equal partners in responding to drought. So moving forward, in the past, we've engaged with tribal nations. We also have partnerships with organizations and networks across the country, but we really want to broaden who we're working with, including the tribal colleges and universities, other tribal alliances and networks across the country. And we also want to increase our coordination with federal agencies and other regional organizations, just to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts and that we really are leveraging those partnerships that already exist for this work that we will be doing. And the tribal engagement strategy can be found on drought.gov, and I'll show you where here in just a little bit. But I wanted to highlight overall what are the key outcomes and activities of the strategy. And as you'll see, the overall strategy is organized around the different components of the drought early warning system. So if we look at research and applications, we want to make sure that the research that is being done around drought has enough of a focus on tribal communities, and making sure that this information is integrated into the knowledge that the tribes have when they're making decisions. Also prediction and forecasting. There are predictions and forecasts out there, but making sure that, again, that tribal nations have access to these forecasts to better understand, in the coming months or years, exactly what might be expected in terms of drought when it comes to their planning efforts. Observations and monitoring. One of the major gaps that was identified as we were developing this strategy is that there is a lack of reservation-specific data when it comes to drought. And so making sure that this information is made available to tribal nations and tailored as we can, including hopefully installing more observation sites across tribal lands. When it comes to planning and preparedness, while a lot more tribal nations have been doing drought planning in recent years, Many tribal resource managers have expressed that once the plans are made, there really are no funds or ways to actually implement those actions on the ground. And so that's a big part of the strategy, is trying to find ways that we can actually, take action. And I'll show you one of those ways here in just a minute. And then also communications and outreach, and making sure a big part of this is that we are building and strengthening those partnerships across our dues, and making sure that they really are key partners within all of our drought early warning systems across the region. So some recent highlights for the work that we've been doing. We've already been introduced to Crystal, who started as our tribal engagement coordinator in early August, and we're really excited to have her on board to really focus on our engagement with tribal nations. And another thing that we have recently, and this goes to the strategy activity about really being able to fund actions on the ground once they are within plans. And that is NIDIS just released about a month or so ago a grant competition called Coping with Drought, Building Tribal Drought Resilience, that is focused on the implementation of actions to build tribal drought resilience on the ground. And so we anticipate funding about $1.5 million worth of projects over the next 2 years, really focused specifically on tribal nations. That's a huge component of this competition, is that a tribal partner has to be a co-PI, and those tribal partners have to be actively engaged. So we're really hoping that the beneficiary in the end is a tribe. And those grants, those proposals are due on October 18th. We did have letters of intent due in early August, but you can still submit a full proposal even if you did not submit a letter of intent. The next thing that we hope to do, and one of the things that Crystal will take on here in the next few months, is that we are going to have some drought.gov tribal listening sessions. I will showcase drought.gov here in a minute, but one of the big things that we want to do moving forward, again, goes back to the priority of making sure that there is reservation specific information available, is we want to make sure that the information on drought.gov is something that's useful for tribal nations across the country. And so we'll be having listening sessions across the different regions in the country to really hear from tribes on what would be useful for them based off of what we currently have, and then thinking forward what else they would like to see on drought.gov. So now I'm just going to quickly go through a little bit of a brief demo of drought.gov, which was completely redesigned and launched in early 2021. There's a lot more up-to-date drought information across the country. You can look at the international scale all the way down to the city, county level. And we'll talk more about this, but the hope is that we can also have very similar pages to our city and county pages for reservations. There's a lot of interactive maps and data that shows the current conditions, historical conditions, and also outlooks. And there's a lot of good basic information on drought itself and research. It showcases the research that's going on right now as well. So let me just quickly go to drought.gov and just show you what we have already available. And then we can discuss from there. So this is the home page, and I just wanted to show you where you can find the tribal information, tribal specific information, although a lot of the information you can get on different pages, but we do have 2 pages in particular. And that is, if you go to by location, we have a tribal page. And this really highlights, where is drought happening right now, kind of like I did earlier, in terms of where is drought affecting tribes across the country. And you can zoom in and see the different boundaries like I had before. And I'll show you where to get that interactive map that I had, which gives you a lot more flexibility on different data layers. We also have general information about key drought impacts on tribal nations, and also information on drought planning and links to some resources here on the right. And we also have some case studies as well. So This is a case study about the Wind River tribe and creating new drought monitoring tools. And our plan is to hopefully have more case studies available in the future on drought.gov. And we also have specific funding opportunities and other resources for tribal nations that we showcase here on this page. I also wanted to show that you can go to the About and learn about our tribal engagement. So this is where you would find the tribal engagement strategy. And it goes a little bit more in depth into the different guiding principles that we have for our tribal engagement, which include respecting tribal sovereignty, ensuring trust and reciprocity, and also making sure that our dues are culturally appropriate and useful for tribal nations. And the strategy goes a little bit more in depth in terms of what NIDIS actually plans to do in terms of holding those guiding principles. And it lays out the different key priorities. And again, it kind of goes over what I did in the presentation on sort of the overarching topics, but then the strategy itself has more information. Okay, so as I mentioned, you can get drought information at all different scales. That is on the by location tab here. And so you'll see that we do have local and county pages. I'm just going to quickly click on the local page and you can see, let's see, I am just going to search for my location in Champaign, Illinois. And you'll see that there is a lot of point specific information for my city and county. One unique thing is that you can actually sign up for alerts. So if you wanted to get notified by email when your location goes into drought or changes levels on the drought monitor, you can sign up for your specific location. And then there's also different drought indicators that you can look at, including the drought monitor, precipitation, stream flow, and other indicators and outlooks as well. And so I mentioned that we do have these available for cities and counties, and the hope is that we can have something available similar for this to the reservation level. And that's where those listening sessions will be helping us sort of design these pages to really figure out what is most useful for our tribal partners. I wanted to showcase our new interactive maps. And so you can find those interactive maps on our bisector pages. And so we have bisector pages for agriculture, manufacturing, wildfire management, ecosystems. I'm going to go to the ecosystems page. And for each of these sector pages, it gives general information about how drought impacts that sector and resources that are available. But one of the new features are these interactive maps that you can visit. And so in this blue box, you'll see this yellow button up here that says View Interactive Map. And each of these sector maps are customized with different data layers related to that sector. So for the ecosystem map, I'll give it a second here to load. My kids are probably watching TV and it's making my internet go slow. Okay. So on this map, you can turn different layers on and off. So this is where you can turn on the boundaries for tribal reservations. And again, they're customized with different types of data layers based on that sector. And so we have the US ecoregions available on this one, which I'm actually going to turn off for a second. We also have forest boundaries as well. So if you're interested at the forest scale, you can turn those on and off. And these again change depending on which map you're looking at. But then there are a lot of different drought pieces of information you can look at. Right now it has the US Drought Monitor. If you wanted to turn off the drought monitor and just look at the drought forecasts, for instance, you can turn those on and off. You can also find the radar. So if you wanted to overlay the US Drought Monitor with the radar, for instance, and you can change exactly, let's see, then you can decrease how opaque the different layers are so you can see it a little bit better. So there's a lot of information available on these interactive maps. If you are interested in diving into looking at different data layers outlined with a certain tribal reservation, you can get lots of different data, including different drought indicators as well. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that new feature. And then just quickly before I wrap up here, if you go to by location, you can also get our drought early warning system pages. I will visit the Northeast since I focused on the Midwest before. And then all of our dues pages have a similar format where you can get the strategic plan, you can get the latest drought status updates. I believe one went out for the Northeast, yes, so July 16th, not too long ago. That's where you can access the drought early warning, the drought status updates. And then if you scroll down further on the page, you can get relevant events that are coming up. You can also search for regional activities. So these are drought activities that are currently happening, not just NIDIS related, but across all of our partners. So if you have a drought activity that you are involved in and you want it showcased on drought.gov, you can email the coordinator. And there's also a resources area that's been customized for each region. So for observations and monitoring, planning, forecasting, it highlights different resources for the region. So I definitely recommend that you check that out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about some region-specific information. And I just wanted to end with having our contact information up here. Again, I'm the coordinator for the Midwest, and Sylvia is the coordinator for the Northeast. And then Crystal is our tribal coordinator, and we'd be happy to connect with any of you if you're interested in learning more or getting signed up for our different email listservs. So yeah, I think I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. I'd love to hear if there's any, thoughts on things that would be useful or, information you're curious about that I wasn't able to touch on just now.
Thank you so much, Molly. Yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I also can unmute folks. So if you do want me to unmute you, you can also raise your hand and I can do it that way. One question I'll start off with, Molly, is so looking at the different sections on here, so the Midwest and the Northeast, what's your advice for those who might not be located exactly within those boundaries?
Yeah, that's a great question, one that we often get for good reason. And, even though we do have these established regions right now, we are actively trying to figure out how exactly we expand to cover those areas that are not covered by a dues. And that's, of course, based on resources and time that we have available. So hopefully in the future, there will be an official region covering the entire country. But I will say that we do support areas that are not officially in a drought early warning system. So we have work in Alaska and Hawaii, and really if there is a need, I recommend that you reach out to one of us, and we're happy to talk through and help where we can. So even though there's not an official region, it doesn't mean that there aren't resources or information that we could help you with. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yes, thanks, Molly. Casey, did you want to go next? And then I'll read Hillary's question after you.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Molly, for your presentation. I just had
I'm sorry, of course,
So, and also I was, this is for Crystal as well. And nice to meet you, Crystal. And looking at the map, one of the things I just wanted to comment on is, it's a really great feature in being able to hone in and get the information. There are several federally recognized tribal nations in the East that do not have trust lands or reservation lands. Many are seeking to have lands placed into trusts, and that's a very, very long process, or it can be. But what we found at United South and Eastern Tribes, sometimes what we do with a lot of our maps is kind of pinpoint the location of tribal government centers or administrative centers as headquarters, because then it gives you a sense of where the tribal lands are. So happy to work with you all, and if you need assistance on that, but just wanted to comment on there for the map. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for mentioning that. And I think we would definitely like to do what we can to make sure that the maps that we are offering are representative, if possible, as best as we can for the areas that tribes are located. So I think that's definitely something, as we start to get into those listening sessions, that we can hopefully sort out a little bit. But thank you, for the offer to help with that. And I don't know, Crystal, if you have anything to add.
No, that's great. And it's a great point that you made, Casey. So that's exactly why we want to do the listening sessions, is to bring up these types of issues. And so, yeah, so we'll definitely make note of that. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Great. And then we have a question from Hillary. She said she thinks you mentioned it, but is there a timeline for including the Great Lakes Basin in the tool?
Yeah. Hi, Hillary. So yes, in terms of sort of when Hillary and I know each other from my past Sea Grant, Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant life, when she was at Minnesota Sea Grant. So it's always good to see you, Hillary. And so the Great Lakes region, I'll probably start once the strategic action plan is released, which hopefully will be here within the next few months. I'll start to do outreach in the Great Lakes region, and really the first few steps are to start to build partnerships and get a lay of the land in terms of, what's already been going on related to drought, who are the partners, making sure that I'm establishing those partnerships and really learning from everyone before, and kind of just taking a needs assessment is really sort of what we'll be doing. So I would say, later this year, early next year, definitely by, 2022, I'll start to, make those connections. And as we start to talk to partners, we can figure out if there are certain things we can do right away to make sure that the Great Lakes are more represented. And there also might be, that longer term sort of, how do we better represent, what are the research needs, that sort of thing for the Great Lakes Basin. So hopefully that answered your question.
Are there any other questions for Molly? Like I said, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A, or raise your hand for being to be unmuted. Okay, well, it seems a bit quiet. So I will be posting this recording. I'll also include Molly and Crystal's and Sylvia's contact information in the email to let everybody have that.